All right, let's talk about Tu Bishvat today. So today we're going to keep it pretty grounded. We're not going to get into any crazy explanations, any esoteric explanations, or stuff based on Kabbalah. We're going to keep it pretty grounded to practical halachas, customs, and origin of what Tu Bishvat's about. So many people have a conception that Tu Bishvat is about the day that fruits and trees or fruit trees are judged on whether that means quantity or quality of the produce that they'll be producing. And I have actually seen that written in some books. However, not everybody agrees to that concept, and they say that that's actually done on Shavuos, not on Tu B'Shvat. So then, what is Tu B'Shvat according to the people who don't hold of that? Well, so everybody agrees Tu B'Shvat is the following. So first, we need a little bit of introduction to the Torah's idea of tithing. So the Torah first prescribes that, let's say a person has an apple field. I just made that up. I didn't really choose a specific example, but a field of apples. And so you grow 100 apples. So the first thing you have to do is take off one apple. On a Torah level, all you have to do is take off one apple, and you would give that apple to a Kohen. That's called Truma Gedola, and you fulfilled your obligation of Truma Gedola with that. The next step, you have to take off 10% of the remaining apples, and you give that to a Levi. That's called Meiser Rishon, the first tithe. It's really not, but okay. And then you have another obligation. You have to take off another 10% of the remaining, and that is called either Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani. Now, what determines whether it's called Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani? So we know that agriculture works in Judaism in 7-year sabbatical cycles, the Shemitah cycle, right? So being 6 years of harvesting, and in the seventh year, and harvesting and growing, and in the seventh year, you have to let it like lie fallow. So in years 1 through 6 are divided the following way. Years 1, 2, 4, 5 get Meiser Sheni designation, and years 3 and 6 get what we call Meiser Ani designation. So now, what determines what is Meiser Sheni? You might be asking, what is Meiser Ani? So Meiser Sheni is that you've already taken off one apple, bare minimum, to fulfill the Truma Gedola. 10% has gone to the Levi, and then this following 10% is going to be taken to Jerusalem and you have to consume it there. That's what the Torah says. Or what you could do if that's not feasible for you, because who says those apples are going to last, however you want to understand it, you would trade those apples in for a coin, and then you would take those coins to Jerusalem and use them to purchase produce in Jerusalem and eat those produce within the walls of Jerusalem. That you would do that, Meiser Sheni, that whole process in years 1, 2, 4, 5. In years 3 and 6 of the Shemitah cycle, you would, instead of going to Jerusalem and doing this whole redemption process, you would just give that 10% produce to the poor people of the land. And in year 7, you don't do any of that because those actions are dependent on you owning fruit to give away. And on the seventh year, everything is considered ownerless. So you would not give those tithes. So now, the way that we come to this, that we come to Tu B'Shvat is that we see that there are transition years in the 6-year cycle. So meaning from years 2 to 3, you go from year 2 being a Meiser Sheni year, and then you have year 3 being a Meiser Ani year. And even going from year to year, also, I believe the Torah does require you to make distinctions. So in order to determine which goes where, we need a demarcation date. So the day that the rabbis decided as a demarcation date to determine, and as a practical example, we'll just use, and this might even apply year to year, I'm just giving it as a practical example, which produce is going to belong to Meiser Rishon, I'm sorry, Meiser Sheni, and which are going to belong to Meiser Ani, the rabbis chose Tu Bishvat as that demarcation zone. Now, there's agricultural ways of determining whether in one case, which we'll see, it determines on whether it was picked before Tu B'Shvat or picked after Tu B'Shvat. Sometimes it has to do with the budding, even if it hasn't been picked. We're not going to get too far into that right now, but I'm going to give you a practical example. I'm reading from Reb Yosef Zevin Sefer Moedim B'Halacha, the English version, and he quotes a Tosefta that's going to help us understand this. So he gives an example of somebody picking esrogim. So if the year going out was the 3rd year and the year coming in was the 4th year, he must take Meiser Ani from the esrogim picked before sundown. So this is an example of where you're picking esrogim before Tu B'Shvat, and then you're picking esrogim on Tu Bishvat. Okay, so I'll read that one more time in case that wasn't clear. Furthermore, if the year going out was the third year, and the year coming in the fourth year, he must take Meiser Ani from the esrogim picked before sundown, but Meiser Sheni from the ones picked after sundown. Thus, Tu Bishvat divides 1 year from the next with regard to Maestros. And you're not allowed to just say, well, okay, I picked these ones before um, Tu Bishvat and these ones after Tu Bishvat, let's say 10 and 10, put them together and just take off two. You can't do that. And where are you going to give those two to, anyways? Because one set really has to be given to the Ani, and one set has to be brought to Yerushalayim. So no, they have to be separate from one another, so that you can know which esrogim belong to which obligation. So Tu B'Shvat is the demarcation date of this. Now, why was Tu B'Shvat chosen to be the demarcation of this? The Gemara talks about it. It says that it is the time when the fruit of the trees begin to take form, since the Gemara says that majority of the year's rains have fallen, which Rashi clarifies to mean is majority of the rainy season has passed. So, I mean, that's an explanation for why Tu B'Shvat is a good demarcation point. And Tu B'Shvat also has a demarcation point for the mitzvah of Orla, which is the fruits produced in the first 3 years of a tree's growth and from which we are forbidden to derive any benefit. It's also the demarcation point for Rivoi, the fruit produced in the fourth year and whose use is restricted. Essentially, it must be eaten in Jerusalem. And some say that in addition, this is the cutoff date for the fourth point, and this is a debate, which is Shemitah, the year of the rest, which is given to the land once in every 7 years. So it's actually a demarcation point for three, if not four things. I just gave you one of the easier ones to understand so that you understand something. Now, on a halachic level, Tu B'Shvat's only mentioned in regards to two things in the Shulchan Aruch in today's world, practical halacha, because the Tu B'Shvat involves a lot of agricultural things that are limited to being in Israel, like the tithes, and there are also some of the stuff is related to the Beis Mikdash, which we don't have today. So, for all intents and purposes, us living in Chutz La'aretz, Tu B'Shvat is brought down in two ways: that we don't say Tachnun in Tu B'Shvat, and we don't fast or give eulogies on Tu B'Shvat. Now, there are customs that people have that are not necessarily halacha. I'll even read from Rabbi Yosef Zevin writes. He quotes the Magen Avraham mentions a special custom on Tu B'Shvat. The Ashkenazi communities have a custom of eating many kinds of fruits. And he mentions that the Sephardic communities have even more than this. So, meaning Ashkenazim just have a custom of basically eating more fruits than normal on this day. But Sephardic communities go out and they have a whole type of Seder, a large meal in observance of Tu B'Shvat. He says here, on Tu B'Shvat, Sephardi Jews learn in their yeshivas nearly all night long. They enhance the celebration of the festival by eating every type of fruit that is to be obtained in the city. Before and after eating of each kind of fruit, they study special passages gathered from Scripture and Zohar. They also pray and sing special prayers and songs. There's a special book of this for this celebration, the book of Pri Tzadar, the fruit of a tree of beauty, containing the order of prayer for Tu B'Shvat, according to the custom of many who fear God and regard His name. So, yeah, that's a custom of the Sephardim, that they'll typically make some sort of Tu B'Shvat Seder, where they'll read from the Sefer and they'll say certain prayers related to Tu B'Shvat. So I want to say that the idea of us actually doing something in commemoration of Tu B'Shvat is so that we don't forget the laws of the agricultural demarcations that we just spoke about. That meaning that really there's nothing for us really to do in Chutz La'aretz, because Tu B'Shvat's of no consequence because all the laws of demarcations of tithes only apply in the land of Israel. But we were kicked out of the land of Israel and we were sent into Gullus. And it is a way to remember these laws and to keep them cognizant on our minds that we celebrate Tu B'Shvat by eating these fruits from Israel, the fruits that these laws do apply to keep it fresh in our mind. So we have like a Seder, kind of keeps it on our mind. Hasidim have a custom of davening. It's brought down in the Bnei Yissaschar, of davening for a very nice esrog for Sukkot. So that meaning that in your tefillah, in your Shemon Esrei, you ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He prepare a beautiful esrog to be ready for you. You daven for that on Tu B'Shvat, that it be ready for you on Sukkot. And that makes some sort of sense because we know that the esrog is fruit tree produce. Lastly, this is just an interesting thing that I saw in a sefer by Rabbi Daniel Glatstein. So if you do the calculation, and there's different calculations, okay, so not everybody has to agree to this calculation with the whole idea of each plague lasting 30 days, right? So we have the Makkah's Bechoros, the plague of the firstborn, taking place on the 15th of Nisan. Then some hold that 30 days earlier, you had the plague of darkness, which would have taken place on what we would call Purim, right? That's why some say that when we light the Havdalah candles and when we're making Havdalah, where we're bringing in light, we read this pasuk by Layadim Haisa Ora V'Simcha, right? This pasuk's actually found in Megillah Esther. What does it have to do with Layudim Haisa Ora, that they had light? Right? What is that? That's Chiddush by Purim, so it goes back all the way to Yetziat Mitzrayim. There's a connection to that. That was when there was a plague of darkness, and we knew the Jewish people had light in their dwelling place. Okay, that's a side point. And then if you go back another 30 days, to which you would find yourself on the 15th of Shvat, which we call Tu Bishvat, that is the day of the plague of locusts. Now, there were other plagues that struck the Egyptian agriculture. But the Sefer Chamrei Tava says that the only plague that struck specifically, in addition to the other agriculture, fruit, the Torah says the only one that touched fruit was the plague of locusts, interestingly, which happened on Tu Bishvat, which I'll read the English translation of the Torah. If the locust swarm covered the surface, the locust swarm, covered the surface of the entire land, and the land was darkened. It ate all the grass of the land and all the fruit of the tree that the hail left over. So that we only see that lashon, those words of the fruit of the tree being consumed by the plague of locusts, which, if you do the calculation, happened on Tu B'Shvat, which is a very interesting thing. And what an apt day for that to happen. Seems like the judgment went against the Egyptian fruit trees in that day. All right, Yashikok, so that's just a very simple explanation of some of the ideas and customs behind Tu B'Shvat. Stay tuned. Hopefully, for the Siyata D'Shmaya, that we can make a more share that's based more in Jewish.